Before the first rays of sunlight reach the pyramids, before the Nile stirs and the market breathes to life, there is silence. And in that silence, a story begins. Not one of kings and crowns, but of ordinary people like you and me. A young boy waking on a straw mat, already sweating under linen sheets. A mother grinding grain before the heat becomes unbearable. A stoneworker praying to gods he will never see before lifting his first hammer of the day. Today, we're not just visiting ancient Egypt. We're stepping into it. We'll live it, not as pharaohs, not as priests, but as the people who made the kingdom move. One sunrise to sunset, one breath at a time. So take a deep breath and ask yourself, could you survive just one day in ancient Egypt? Because what you're about to discover isn't just about history. It's about what happens when the sun becomes your boss, the gods your jury, and survival your only job title. You open your eyes, but the sun got there first. There are no shutters, no shades, just a thatched reed ceiling that's glowing hot from the inside out. Light pours into your hut like boiling water. There's no snooze button, no gentle morning playlist. The only soundtrack is heat, rising, crawling, wrapping around your body like a second hotter skin. You're lying on a straw mat. The linen sheet that covers you isn't really for warmth. It's just a thin attempt at dignity. Your back aches from sleeping on packed earth, and already your neck is damp. You sit up slowly. Every movement is stiff, like you're peeling yourself off the floor of an oven. Welcome to morning in ancient Egypt. The temperature? It's pushing 90 degrees, and it's not even breakfast time. You step outside hoping for a breeze. There isn't one. That Nile River breeze the documentaries like to romanticize? It's a myth by mid-morning. Your linen tunic clings to your body like wet parchment. It was supposed to be breathable, but in this sun, it's about as useful as a paper napkin in a steam room. And there's no such thing as sunscreen. No aloe vera, no SPF 50, not even a hat with a wide brim. The elite might have oils, perfumes, even imported ointments from Syria or Nubia. But you? If you're lucky, you've got mud. If you're unlucky, crocodile dung. Both were used sometimes as folk protection against the sun. It's strange. The sun here isn't just heat. It's a god. Ra, the sun god, doesn't gently light your day. He blazes through it like a king on a war chariot. The brighter and harsher the sun, the more powerful Ra is said to be. So if you feel like you're melting today, that's divine approval. In ancient Egypt, weather wasn't just weather, it was theology. Your suffering under the sun wasn't meaningless. It was a kind of spiritual flattery. Of course, belief gives pain purpose, but still, it's pain. And here's a small truth you don't hear often. Ancient Egyptians were resilient, but not superhuman. They were sunburned, dehydrated, exhausted, just like we would be. So the next time you step into summer heat in, say, Phoenix or Death Valley, imagine doing it barefoot, with no shade, no ice water, and a full workday ahead of you. That's not history. That's what millions lived, every single day. And yet, they didn't just survive. They built wonders in that heat. That's the lesson here. Before Egypt was a land of gods and gold, it was a land of will, of people who woke up in hellfire and walked into it anyway. And when the sweat on your brow becomes too much to bear, there's only one place to go, the Nile. But don't expect a cool, refreshing swim, because that sacred river, it's sacred, yes, but it's also a bit disgusting. They call it the lifeblood of Egypt, the Nile. On paper, it's perfect, lush, eternal, the reason this entire civilization exists. Every village, every farm, every festival depends on its waters. But here's the thing. Before you even see it, you smell it. The Nile doesn't smell like fresh river water. It smells like a fish market had a heat stroke. It's a mix of wet mud, dead fish, frog eggs, livestock waste, and possibly your neighbor's laundry soap, if they were lucky enough to afford any. Still, it's where you go. To bathe, to drink, to wash clothes, to fill water jars for cooking. It's where you hope the crocodiles are busy somewhere else. Soap? That's a luxury. Instead, you scrub with sand. It's like exfoliating with a handful of gravel and hope. And it's not just your skin. You wash your tunic by dunking it, slamming it on a rock, and praying it doesn't float away. Meanwhile, upstream, someone's funeral boat might be floating by. Downstream, a cow's doing its business. It's all connected. And yet, despite the murk and mess, the Nile is sacred. It's personified as Hapi, a god of fertility. There are hymns written in its honor, offerings made on its banks. Because no matter how dirty it gets, the Nile still feeds your fields. It gives you barley, onions, fish, and life. You don't complain about the smell. You're grateful. Because in a land where the sun wants to roast you alive, the Nile is the only place that keeps you standing. You carry your jars home, careful not to spill. Water is heavy, your hands are scratched, your back aches. But you've done this every day since childhood, and tomorrow you'll do it again. The Nile may not be pure, but it's all you've got. Sometimes the things that save us aren't pretty. They're not filtered, bottled, or blessed with citrus scent. They're dirty, complicated, real, but we hold on to them anyway. Because survival rarely looks like a postcard. You've bathed, you've hauled water, and now you're hungry. But don't expect breakfast in bed. In ancient Egypt, breakfast is less meal and more battle. Breakfast in ancient Egypt doesn't come with a side of fruit or a cinnamon swirl. It's functional. You sit, if you're lucky, on a stool. If not, you squat near the wall like everyone else. In front of you, a chunk of bread. Dense, dark, and rough around the edges, literally. It's made from emmer wheat or barley, baked in clay ovens. And if you feel a little crunch, that isn't the crust. That's sand. Not seasoning, just a bonus feature. You chew slowly, not because you're savoring, but because this bread could pass for a training tool at a dentist's office. Why is it so gritty? Because grain is ground on stone slabs. And over time, bits of the grinding stone break off and become part of the recipe. Imagine eating a piece of toast and filing your molars at the same time. That's Egyptian breakfast. In fact, archaeologists have found skulls from the period with flattened, worn-down teeth, not from sugar, but from sand. Now comes your drink, beer. But not the kind you sip at a summer barbecue. This is thick, cloudy, more of a liquid bread than a beverage. It's made by partially baking barley, then fermenting it in large jars. It tastes earthy, maybe a little sour, definitely warm. Even the kids drink it, not to be edgy, but because it's safer than water. The Nile may sustain life, but it's not always safe to swallow. Beer, at least, has been boiled. And that's your meal. No olives, no dates, unless someone had extra. No meat, no eggs, just you. A loaf, a bowl of porridge beer, and a swarm of flies you now consider regulars. You eat to fuel the day, not to enjoy it, because pleasure isn't part of the recipe. Sometimes survival doesn't taste good. It's dry, it's bland, it's rough on the edges. But it keeps you going, and in a world where every calorie is earned with sweat, good enough is good fortune. Your stomach's no longer empty. Your day is just beginning. And now it's time to work, not in an office, not with coffee breaks, but under a sun that never clocks out. In ancient Egypt, your hands spoke louder than your words. And your back? That was your resume. Whether you were a farmer, a stonemason, or a water hauler, your body was the tool, your strength, your currency, and work never waited. If you're a farmer, and most people were, you'd be in the fields by sunrise. Feet sunk in Nile mud, hands blistered from pulling weeds or planting grain. The tools, simple wooden plows, bronze sickles, maybe a worn-down hoe passed from your father. There were no tractors, no gloves, no shade. Just you, the earth, and a quota to meet before the overseer starts yelling. And if you weren't in the fields, you might be here, hauling limestone blocks under a sun that feels personal. No steel cranes, no hydraulics, just ramps, logs, ropes. Some say the pyramids were built by slaves, but the truth is more complex. Many were paid workers, laborers recruited seasonally, especially when the Nile flooded and farms paused. They received food, beer, shelter. But don't mistake that for comfort. A 2-ton stone doesn't care if you have a lunch break. And one misstep on those ramps, that could be your last. Others chiseled tombs, carving out eternity in limestone, one symbol at a time. Can you imagine hammering for 12 hours in a cave with only torchlight and dust for company? And if you carved the wrong name or left out a god, it wasn't just your job, it was your fate. Some workers were sealed inside tombs, as punishment or ritual, a small mistake, carved forever. And if you're a woman, your labor doesn't end when the sun goes down. You grind grain, you fetch water, you raise children, you cook, you clean, you carry, you mend. No weekends, no rest, just motion, always motion. We often celebrate the kings, the pyramids, the temples, the gold, but those things weren't built by pharaohs. They were built by bodies, and every monument is a mountain of invisible exhaustion. So the next time you look at a pyramid, don't just ask how it was built. Ask who paid for it with their spine. You worked from sunrise to near collapse, but even when your body wants to complain, your mouth stays shut, Because your boss isn't just powerful, he's divine. In ancient Egypt, you don't just have a boss, you have a god. And he has a name, Pharaoh. He doesn't clock in. He doesn't hold meetings. He holds the sun in one hand, and your fate in the other. You've never met him, you probably never will. But you see his face everywhere, on walls, temples, coins, statues, and the message is clear. He rules because the gods chose him, not a man, not a mortal, but the living embodiment of Horus, son of Ra, the divine made flesh. If the harvest is good, you thank the Pharaoh. If the Nile floods just right, you thank the Pharaoh. If your child recovers from fever, you guessed it, thank the Pharaoh. But if things go wrong, maybe you didn't pray hard enough. Maybe you brought imbalance. Maybe it's not the king who failed, but you. That's how power works here. You don't question it, because questioning isn't just impolite, it's blasphemy. Say the wrong thing, a whip, a cell, or worse, your name scratched off the records. In a world where being remembered means eternal life, that's the worst punishment of all. You don't just die, you vanish. Children are taught to recite his titles, Lord of the Two Lands, Son of the Sun, Eternal Ruler of Order. And so, your obedience isn't political, it's cosmic. Defying the Pharaoh means defying Ma'at, the principle of balance and harmony that keeps the universe from falling apart. When power wears the face of a god, it no longer needs to convince, it simply is. And when belief becomes law, even silence becomes a form of worship. You don't resist, you bow, not out of fear, but because you were never taught to do anything else. And in the shadows of temples and thrones, another kind of strength holds Egypt together. It doesn't wear crowns, but it carries water, bakes bread, raises the next generation. Let's meet her. She has rights, more than her sisters in ancient Greece, or Rome, or even parts of medieval Europe. She can own property, she can divorce her husband, she can sue in court, inherit land, sign contracts. In the eyes of Egyptian law, she is not property, she is a person. Sounds empowering, right? And it is. In some ways, ancient Egyptian women had more legal autonomy than European women 3,000 years later. There were even female doctors, scribes, priestesses, and royal advisors. And in rare cases, pharaohs, like Hatshepsut, who ruled for decades and left behind one of Egypt's most magnificent temples. But legal rights don't cancel out daily reality, and hers is brutal. She wakes before the sun. She grinds grain by hand, a motion so repetitive it wears away bone in the wrist. She hauls water, feeds animals, kneads bread, weaves linen. She gives birth at home, without medicine, often without help. No anesthesia, no sterilization, just prayers, warm water, and the strength to keep breathing. There's no me time, no spa days. And when the baby finally naps for 7 precious minutes, she's already kneeling to start dinner. Even her clothes offer no comfort. A simple linen dress, no shoes, no undergarments. The sun bites her skin. The sand bites everything else. And yet, when her husband dies, she doesn't lose her home. She inherits it. She can raise her children without fear of being thrown into the street. That's not just progressive, that's powerful. Laws can give you rights, but only life gives you space to breathe. And in ancient Egypt, even freedom comes wrapped in dust, in sweat, and in silence. She may not wear a crown, but she holds up half the kingdom. And when the day is done and her work is finally quiet, she still prays, not just for peace, but for safe passage. In ancient Egypt, death wasn't the end. It was an entrance exam, a test you'd been preparing for since the day you were born. When you die, your body rests, but your soul begins a very long journey. First stop, the Hall of Ma'at, the cosmic courtroom. There, you face 42 divine judges and declare your innocence. I did not lie. I did not steal. I did not cheat the gods or covet my neighbor's donkey. Then comes the moment that decides everything. Your heart, believed to carry your soul, is placed on a scale. On the other side, the feather of Ma'at, symbol of truth, balance, justice. If your heart is lighter or equal, you pass. You earn the right to enter the field of reeds, a peaceful paradise where everything you loved in life is restored. But if your heart is heavier, you're fed to Ammit. Ammit doesn't punish, she devours. And if she eats your soul, you don't go to hell, you just stop existing. That's the worst fate an Egyptian could imagine, to be forgotten, to never reach the afterlife, to have no name, no memory, no meaning. That's why people prepared for death like we prepare for exams. They memorized spells, practiced the correct answers, commissioned copies of the Book of the Dead, a kind of spiritual cheat sheet for the underworld. Pages filled with directions, passwords, prayers, even reminders like, "Don't insult the crocodile god." Rich or poor, everyone tried. Some had golden sarcophagi, painted tombs, jars of perfume, and 300 lines of sacred verse. Others had just a strip of cloth and a pot of beer, but all carried hope, the hope of passing that final test. Most ancient cultures feared death. The Egyptians, they studied for it, because to them eternity wasn't a gift, it was earned. So as you close your eyes one final time, you don't beg, you don't panic, you recite what you practiced, and you hope. Your heart is light enough to rise. Of course, getting to the afterlife isn't free. Tombs don't build themselves, and not everyone stays buried for long. In life, you worked hard to feed your family. In death, you hope to rest in peace. But in ancient Egypt, even the dead had something others wanted, and some were willing to risk curses, jail, even execution, for a handful of gold or a loaf of funeral bread. You see, Egyptian tombs weren't just places to grieve. They were bank vaults. The wealthy were buried with jewelry, perfumes, food, weapons, amulets, furniture, anything they thought they'd need in the afterlife. Pharaohs took it further. Golden masks, solid gold coffins, even full-sized boats. So of course tomb robbing became a full-time profession. Some came at night digging tunnels under cover of darkness. Others were insiders, builders, guards, even priests. When times were hard, famine, civil war, poverty, even the most sacred space became a source of survival. Some did it out of greed, others out of desperation. One gold amulet could feed a starving family for a month. A linen shroud could be sold or reused. Even the food left for the dead could keep the living alive. Egyptians knew this would happen. That's why many tombs were carved with curses, threats of divine revenge. Some warned of blindness, others promised madness, disease, or eternal erasure. But most didn't work, because when hunger knocks, curses lose their bite. Today we see the damage. Broken jars, looted chambers, sacred names chipped off the walls. It's easy to judge, but maybe, just maybe, we should also understand. When the dead are buried with treasure, the living will come for it. Not because they don't believe in eternity, but because they can't afford tomorrow. The ancient Egyptians believed the soul needed offerings, food, water, remembrance. But the truth? Sometimes all a person had was a name, whispered once a year, and maybe that's enough to keep a soul alive, because in Egypt, nothing lasts forever, except words. There is no alphabet here, no ABCs, no vowels, no punctuation, only pictures, eyes, birds, suns, a beetle rolling a ball, a man walking sideways. To us, they seem like art. To ancient Egyptians, they were something far greater, words that could keep your soul alive. Learning to write in ancient Egypt was a rare gift. Maybe 1% of the population could do it. Those who did were called scribes, and they were trusted with everything: taxes, prayers, laws, birth records, tomb inscriptions. They didn't just write history, they created eternity. The Egyptians believed that to write someone's name was to protect their soul, to keep it remembered, anchored, and to erase a name, that was a death worse than death. Because in Egypt, you don't live forever unless someone can say your name. That's why tomb robbers were feared, not just for stealing gold, but for destroying names. To have your name scraped from stone was to be erased from the afterlife, forgotten in both worlds. Hieroglyphs weren't just sound, they were spirit. The word hieroglyph comes from the Greek, sacred carving, because Egyptians believed these signs held magical power, to speak, to summon, to bind a soul to the world. Today we can still read those names: Merit, Khufu, Senefer. People long gone, but somehow still here, because someone carved their names deep enough to outlive time. We all want to be remembered, to matter, to leave behind more than dust. And in ancient Egypt, the simplest way to do that was with a name. So even if you have no gold, no tomb, no pyramid with your face on it, one name whispered, one word written is enough to keep your memory breathing. Because long before skyscrapers and satellites, before paper and print, there was one thing even more powerful than words: rhythm. So now that you've seen it, the heat, the hunger, the work, the gods, the dust that never leaves your skin, let's ask the question again. Could you survive a day in ancient Egypt? No filtered water, no air conditioning, no ibuprofen, no weekends, no freedom to ask, why am I doing this? Because the sun doesn't care, the overseer doesn't ask, and the gods, They're watching, but they don't explain. You probably wouldn't last the morning, and if you did, the sandstorm might get you, or the river, or the work, or simply the weight of it all. But here's the beautiful truth. They did. They survived. Not just one day, but thousands of years. Brick by brick, prayer by prayer. They built monuments that outlasted empires. So maybe the point isn't whether you could survive in their world. Maybe the point is to remember that they survived in theirs, with fewer tools, harsher odds, and unshakable belief. They lived with rhythm, with reverence, and with the quiet hope that someone, someday, would still speak their name. Every time we remember them, every time we whisper a name, or run our fingers across old stone, or listen to stories like this, we keep them alive, we survive with them. Thank you for walking this day with us. May your heart stay light, and your name never be lost.